So yeah, this is the Maison Rose in Paris Montmartre. We've done a sky replacement here, so we've added the sky in. Um, so using these sliders, as I say, I tend to be quite aggressive to just see what the effect would be. If I go a long way this way, it bleeds into, and if I come back, you see you get a huge halo around the edge there. So in the middle, there's a little bit of halo, so we need to move just a little bit to the right just to see that we get enough blending, but not too much that it cuts over the edge there. So I think that's about right. And also the fade edge is quite good as well. You can go low there or you can go high, and you can see the effect it has, particularly on the more distant areas over here. So excuse me. So if we go too low, we get the blending into the building. We don't want that, so we want to bring it up so we're just not coming into the edge of the building there. And I'm just moving that up until I'm happy, and I think that's about there. So we're getting a pretty good edge with this sky replacement. Then underneath you've got the adjustments, you've got the brightness, and you've got the temperature. We can always add more temperature if we want to make it more orange, like this, or we can go into the blues to bring the contrast back. Now, bringing it back into the blues actually helps the scene, because this was shot in quite a blue scene anyway. The white balance is quite blue. So moving it back into the blue would sort of suit that a little bit. But the other option you can have, if you don't want to go too far in the blue, is you can use the color adjustment slider at the bottom. And by sliding that up, you can affect the foreground with the color of the sky. So I've pulled that all the way to the right there, so you can see it's added that sort of color to the area. So if you are adding a sunset to a scene that is not a sunset area, you can move this color adjustment over to find some sort of balance. So I'm going to go just a little bit into that color there. The edge lighting also affects how much light bleeds in across onto the object. So if you go all the way to the right, you can see that we have a nice dark edge. If you always go to the left, you can see it's a little bit lighter. So you just again want to try to find that area which works quite well to make sure that you've not got a halo there. And then you've got the foreground lighting. I can move that from left to right, and you can see the effect it has overall. So if I go far left, you can see this up in the top left corner, this part of the tree there is now really bright, and if I go over to the right, it goes really dark. So it affects your foreground. So I'm just going to bring the foreground a little bit lighter, probably around about there. So one of the things that often people tend to do when they're doing their images is they tend to shy away from bright colors or from high contrast or from a lot of clarity. And what I tend to do is I tend to like to go for quite a bright, colorful, high contrast image to start off with. And the good thing is with Lightroom and Photoshop is it's obviously non-destructive, so we can always step back if we overdo it a little bit. And from my time working on YouTube and Facebook to see what sort of images people like, you tend to find that the higher levels of saturation, the higher levels of contrast tend to get more interest, strangely. And a lot of that's to do with the visual cycle, the visual sort of cycle of effect that your own psychological process of looking at the world looks at. If you see a sunset when you're on holiday, you're having a great time, you're in a very positive mood, you see a sunset, and your brain adds emotion, adds a feeling to what you're seeing. So you tend to record this very sort of saturated, very stunning scene. And when you get home, having taken that photograph, you look at that photograph again from your camera and you think, it didn't look anything like that. And that's because the camera hasn't added the emotion to the image, right? One of the things that I've learned is you've got to reapply that emotion that you have from that scene. Now, in this case, we're using a sky replacement, but I still want to add emotion. I still want to bring drama to the process. So adding saturation and contrast will bring that emotion into the scene. And that's what gives people the wow sort of factor. So I'm pretty happy with where we are with this for now. I might just add a little bit more color into the foreground. And I'm happy to go with that. Now, just a little tip: if you do have an area in the scene which is which you think I may not have I may not have got the edge correct, you know, I might have too much halo, whatever. Zoom in and have a look, and you can see here with the sliders that I've used, even down to each leaf, it's worked the sky replacement in beautifully. And I think a lot of people suffer from the processes of sky replacement. They do feel that they get too much halos, and they don't get what they think is right. And all I can urge you to do is to take a little bit of time with the sliders, particularly in Photoshop, to try to find that edges. And as you just saw there, the edges of those leaves are perfectly done by using these sliders. So don't be shy to move the sliders, really, really important. So I'm going to accept this. I don't need to do any edge correction. I could use the refine tool here if I wanted to just refine the edge, and I could take a bigger brush here and I could just sort of refine the edge, but there's no need. I'm quite happy with this. Maybe a little bit along the top there. I can just run along the top just to make sure that's right, but that's a good starting point. Now, to output from here, you do have a pull down, and you can select new layers, or you can select duplicate layer, and new layers will bring you a separate layer for each of the sky replacement actions. So you end up about 6 or 7 additional layers, and duplicate layer just makes one copy of what you want, which is all I actually want. So I'm going to just say okay to that there, and you can see now it's given me an extra layer with the sky replacement. If I turn that off, we go back to where we were pre sky replacement. If I turn it back on, you can see that sky's come back in there. So so I don't actually want the second layer, so I'm actually going to delete it. I don't need it. I'm just going to stick with the one layer, and the reason I do that is to keep the image size relatively small. If I come back into Lightroom, it will still hold that second layer data in the background, and that will add a number of hundreds of megabytes to the size of the image. So whilst we're here, we're going to just just take out a number of things. This metal cowling, for example, I don't really want that. So I'm going to go into the the heal tool here, spot healing brush tool, and I'm going to take not too big a brush, but and what you need to do when you use this tool, when you're taking out larger objects, is you need to overlap the edge ever so slightly. So as you come around, always overlap the edge, and just go around there, and then make sure you fill in the center without letting go of the mouse, and then it will, and by magic, it always amazes me, we've got to do a little bit of correction on the roof there, but it's filled in there okay. Now I can try to use this healing brush again just to take out the detail there a couple of times, just to see that we're comfortable, and I think actually I'm going to live with that. Now, normally I would go through, I think, take out these lights as well, because these modern lights don't look particularly good. So I'm going to make the brush a little bit smaller, and I'm just going to go round and just try to take out the lights. Now, the edge of this window might be difficult, and we'll come back and correct that in a minute. And I'm just going to take these lights out here just by using the spot healing tool. There we go. That's good. Hold down the space bar, move over, take out this one as well. So you can see I'm not using a huge brush. I'm using a relatively small brush, and I'm just overlapping the edges as I go around, and it's amazing what it can do. So happy with that. We've got the cowling off the roof. This rubbish, there's some rubbish bags down here. Let's get rid of those as well. Hopefully it'll do a good job with that. Not bad at all. A little bit of correction there. I'm just going to jump over to the stamp tool, take a slightly bigger brush using the square brackets next to the return key just to size them up. I'm going to take an imprint from here and just move that over into there, and just finish that off. That's not too bad. I might even take a little bit from here and just put that in there just to tidy that up. Some more bins down there in the distance, so I'm going to go back to the spot healing tool there and just go around the bins and just take those out, and it does a pretty good job, to be fair. Now the big one is this car. These cars here don't really want the car in the scene. So I'm actually going to try to take these cars out, make the brush a little bit bigger, overlap slightly, just paint the cars in, and just try to take those out. So black them all in with one drop of the brush there. And okay, that's not so good. It's not done such a good job there. So we can use the stamp tool. We can get the edge of the road here, take a stamp from here, and we can draw this road down a little bit further, just like this. Take another stamp, and we can just take that down there. I'm going to take the corner of this lamp post and just place this down here on the corner of this lamp post. Just drop it in there, so that's nice and tidy there. And I think we could even maybe take these railings over here and extend these railings towards that lamppost there, and maybe even take the railings past and bring them across here. Just going to take another stamp from there. And so all I'm doing is really just trying to fill in this gap down the end here, because we're taking that car out, so we're just using the stamp tool to do that. And I'm just going to put that in there like that. And then maybe we can take some of this information from here and just pop it in to tidy up this area over here. So the road doesn't look so yeah, I'm just going to take a little bit from here as well. Just drop these stone sizes down a little bit. So you can, and bear in mind how close we are. If I go back to fit screen, you'll see that we've actually now sorted that area out down there, got rid of the car. You don't have to go into massive detail, just need to make sure that it looks believable from a distance. These posts here, I think we need to deal with these two posts at the bottom. So I'm just going to do the same thing. I'm just going to zoom in there, bring them up, and then we're going to take the spot healing brush again. Not too big a brush. Now what I can do here is I can click once there, I can hold down the shift key, and I can click again at the bottom to get a straight line, and it will actually take out that side. So I can do the same here. I can go at the bottom, go at the top with the shift key, and I can try to remove it as such, and I can freehand that center piece in, just to try to get rid of that. Not too happy with that. I'm going to Command or Control Z to just go back, and I can try freehanding the whole thing. Just come in there, and I might even do both at the same time. There we go. Let's paint those in with the spot healing tool and see what happens. Not too good, but I'm going to try to get rid of that one again. There we go. Right.
Jamie, why don't you go directly to the stamp clone tool versus doing it twice?
Good question. What I find is that sometimes the spot healing tool does a really good job, and actually you only need to do a little bit of tidying up with the stamp tool. Sometimes it doesn't. You can always use the patch tool as well. You know, that's an option as well if you want to use the patch tool to do this. But by using that, you can see there's a bit of work that needs to be done. Yeah, there is. And I will go to the stamp tool now just to tidy that up. So I'm going to, you know, just start working my way through here just to put the edge of that in there. But that's the reason why I tend to just use the spot healing brush, just to try to work through and get rid of it. This bit of drain, I'm not going to be able to complete the whole drain there. That's going to be quite difficult. So it's probably easier that we actually we use the stamp tool there to the right and just basically work that out of the scene. Let's go back a bit there and try a bit further over. There we go. But that's the reason I do that, is sometimes the magic is really, really, really good. Get rid of these white marks. And then we have to decide whether we want to try to put all those stones back in or whether we want to leave it like that. So maybe we can. I'm going to do the stamp tool from down here. So Sorry about that. Why is it doing that? Spot heating brush. Oh, because I'm in spot heating brush. That's white, not in stamp tool. Let's try again. There we go. And then we can paint a bit of that back in there. Maybe bring
Have
these.
you tried creating a plane and getting it to do it in perspective?
You could do that, yeah. That's another option you could do to try to sort of blend it in from a distance. Many ways to skin a cat. I tend to just have a play with. I must admit, I am always so impressed with what you can do with these tools. It's very, very impressive. But I will just step back from that now and just see how that looks there. Let's get this out of the way. So we've got rid of those posts down there. I mean, if I had more time, I would spend a little bit more time on it just to make sure that we're getting this sorted. So for now, I'm just going to move forward. We're going to do a bit of classic day tonight. So I think I'm happy with the things I've removed for now. I'm going to throw this back into Lightroom. Now, and people have different ways of doing this. What I like to do is I tend to go to File and I click Close and then I go to Save. And that throws it straight back in. It's saving down here in the bottom left corner. That throws it back directly into Lightroom. If you go to File, Save or Save As, I find that it tends to put it back into the Lightroom folder, but it doesn't tend to put it back into the viewer. So you then have to resynchronize the folder. But if you do actually use File, Close, Save, then it goes straight back into Lightroom with the full viewer capable. So we are back in Lightroom. So there's the image that we had. So we have the before, and we have the after, where we've done with the sky replacement and a little bit of tidying up. So where do we start with day to night? Well, this image is already quite dark, so I'm just going to darken the whole thing just a little bit more, maybe bring it back another sort of 3/4 of a stop. And one of the things I like to do is I like to relight a scene. Dodging and burning is a good way to bring drama, to bring depth to an image. But I prefer to make it slightly darker and then relight things back to the levels that I want. So as we can see here, it's now a little bit dark. You're probably seeing it quite dark. So first thing I'm going to deal with is this window up here. So we're going to zoom in on that window. So I'm just going to go into 100%. You can tell it's a 100 megapixel image here because that's 100%. It's a bit too close. I might even go to let's go to 60%, maybe even further back. So 50%. So we're going to take a mask. We're going into masks. We're going to take a radial gradient, my favorite tool of all. We're going to take this radial gradient and we're going to put it over the windows. Now, big mistake people make when doing day to night is they'll put a radial gradient on the window and they'll put the radial gradient in the center like this. And actually, when you consider where the light would be coming from in that room, it's going to be coming from a light source, a light fitting. The light fitting is not going to be in the middle of this window. It's going to be up somewhere in the ceiling area, somewhere up here, something like that. And the light's going to be coming down from an angle. So put your radial up where the light source might be in that room, and then make your radial gradient large enough to cover that window. So it's effectively covering this window down this way. And when you've got that in position, what we can now do is we can now brighten this scene up on this radial by taking the exposure slider and just taking it to maximum. Don't mess about. You can always change it later on. And I'm just going to add a little bit of color to that as well, just to just give it that bright look. And now we're going to take away from this scene the parts of the radial gradient that we don't want. We don't want to light up all these plants and all this area. We only want to light up the window. So we do that by subtracting a brush, okay? And that brush is going to have no feather at all. It's going to have a really crisp hard edge, and we're going to go 100% flow. So wherever I draw now, we will remove the radial gradient. You can see that. So what we need to do is go around the window effectively and take away the area that we don't want the light. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come down the edge of this window. I'm just going to click once, and then I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller. I'm going to use shift click to get a straight line down the edge, and I leave this little bit of the window on the edge here because the light coming from this window would light this area, so we want to deal with that in a little while. I'm going to go down here, the same thing, shift click, and just work my way around the window using shift click to just catch the edge of the window. We'll deal with these plants in a little while. And same up here, we're going to come onto the edge of this window, and we're just going to come down here, just working our way around the window itself. It's a little bit difficult here because we've got plants here to deal with, but we will come back to them in a minute. So I'm just taking out the area here, make my brush bigger, and I'm just going to go round this outside area, removing the radial gradient just by using the shift click function. And then what we'll do is we will finish that off in a little while. I'm just going to zoom out slightly. We will just take that, go back to fit. I'm going to take the big brush here, and now we've started that process, I'm going to take the rest of that radial gradient away. If you want to see where your mask is, just hover over the mask here, and you will see what's red. You can see it's just the window now. There's nothing else around here. If you hover over the brush, you'll see where your brush has been, so you can see where your brush has gone. And if you hover over the radial gradient, you'll see where the radial gradient is. So it's quite a nice way of seeing how your mask is working. I'm going to go back into the window. We're going to come in a little bit closer now. So we're going to go to 100%. We're going to take our brush. It's still got the 100% selected at the moment, but I want to back that off just a little bit. I'm going to bring the flow back to about 85%, and I'm now going to go around the window frame. So I'm click, shift, click, and I'm just going to work around the window frame here to take out the radial gradient from the part of the window I don't want to illuminate. So we're just going around there now and changing the size of your brush to suit the size of the window frame. And I literally am going to draw that window frame in with the removal of the radial gradient. So as you can see, I'm just clicking around there and making sure, holding down the shift key just to get that straight line effect as we go around. Now it looks very coarse at the moment, and I'll show you how we deal with this. For the moment, I'm just getting the main parts of the window effect. Oh, what did I press there? There we go. That's no good. Let's click again. Shift, click. What's she doing to me? What are you doing to me? That's it. And then we do have to go around these leaves over the window, and again I'll show you how we do that once I've got these main parts of the window frame sorted. There we go. So we're going to make the brush slightly bigger, and then we're going to just going to back off just a little bit more on the flow, and then we're just going to come in here and we're just going to paint roughly where the leaves are. Just take those out. So all we're doing is removing the radial gradient. That's all we're actually doing. Keep changing the size of your brush to suit the size of the leaves, just to get them in there. It's a difficult one because normally you don't have leaves in front of the window, so you can tend to be quite quick with your straight lines. And let's get that brush a little bit bigger there. Just give me a moment just to get these. And then there we go. And then this one up here. So we're just removing the the radial gradient by doing this. That's all we're doing, is just taking it away from these bright leaves that are in front of the window. I'll just make that brush bigger. There we go. So I'm being a little bit coarse for now. Normally I would go a little bit more detail just to get those in there. So I'm comfortable with that. Now the next trick is to get this to the right level. We have to blend the edges of these lines that we've drawn, which were a high flow rate. So we've got to try to blend some colour into the edges to give a fade away. So what we do is we reduce the flow back to about 30%, something like that. We can bring the feather up just a little bit to about 20%. And what we can do now is take a slightly larger brush on these areas, and where we have a hard edge, we click at the top and we shift click at the bottom, and we go back and forth a little bit just to blend those hard edges. Now we've got a lower flow. We're just going to go back and forth like this, look, as you can see, and just blending those hard lines in. Same here. And we just blend those edges very gently. Take a slightly smaller brush and just go over the straight edges with just a couple of passes. So we just blend the edges down. It just makes it a little bit more believable. And I'm just going to go over here. There we go. And I'll probably pop just one bigger one along the bottom here. Can you see how that's just sort of gradually blending that edge away, and it makes it a lot more believable when you've done that. And the same up here, I'm just going to blend that edge along there. A little bit bigger brush, because we've got a low flow. We can gradually build up the level of sort of shadow in those areas. Now the real key to making it work, I'm just going to get these last couple up here, is making sure you, oops, apologies, that's Control Z to undo that. We can we've got to put the shadows, and remember the light. If you remember, the light source is up here. This is the center of our radial gradient. So any shadows coming out of these windows are going to come from that direction. So where we have a window frame here, for example, what we need to do is put a shadow line coming away from there. So still with this low flow and a little bit of feather, I'm going to click on that window there, find the line from up there down. It's going to come through here and just click like this, look, you see? And it just creates a little shadow coming away from that window frame. Same down here, which will be further down. I can just put a shadow off that window frame down here. And that just sort of gives you the effect that you've got a bit of a shadow. Close in, it doesn't look brilliant, but once you pan back, you'll see you get quite a nice effect from it. So I'm just going to finish off with that there. There we go. So that's our window. That's our window done. So if I come back, if we come back to fit, you'll see this window. If I come out of there now, you've got this light, a lot of light at the top, less light at the bottom. And we can now, of course, we can go into that mask and we can vary the amount of light that we've got in that area. We can add more highlights to it if we want to make it brighter, more whites if we want to make it brighter up there, or we can bring it back a little bit if we just want to have the light at the top. If it's too bright at the top up here and you want it not so bright, what you can do is, I can bring that up, is you can just go to the mask and subtract another brush, and you can just take the brush here with quite a low flow, a little bit of feather, and you can actually just wash over that top window a little bit if you want to, just to reduce the amount of light that's coming through there. So that was probably a bit much. I'm just going to go again, subtract brush, and then I'm just going to reduce that flow down a little bit more, and I'm just going to wash over that window just so it's not quite so bright, as you can see there. So it gives you that sort of look as though the window's on, looking quite good. So we're also going to do some of the lighting here. We need some street lighting to light this road up. So you've got some street lights down here. So let's zoom in over here again. So we're going to go to 100%. We're going to go over here. That's it. Just up in there. So there's a street lamp here, as you can see, and there's one in the distance there. So we take the same approach. We're going to take a new mask. We take a radial gradient. We'll take a radial gradient that's a little bit bigger than the lamp itself. Put the center where the lamp is going to be. Let's not go too big. Bring the exposure up so it's really bright. Subtract a brush. Okay, no feather, 100% flow. And then we're just going to go around, this light fitting, same way, shift click, and just take away the mask where it's not on the lantern. So effectively all we want is the center of the lantern illuminated. Bigger brush, just start removing that radial filter around there. There we go. Make sure you don't go over. Of course, if you do accidentally go over there like that, you can always just Control or Command Z to undo that, and that brings you back. Hover over the mask, make sure you only got that area, which we have. That's good. So that looks okay, but what we're going to do is we're going to right click on this radial, and we're going to duplicate the mask. Don't duplicate the radial gradient, because that means you've got two of the same. What we want is we want to duplicate the mask so that we have control over the second mask. And then we take the second one that we've got now on top, and we make it the size of the lamp that would be inside the fitting, like this. Okay, so if that's probably still a bit big, make it a bit smaller. So if I come away from that now, you can see you've got the lantern with the lamp inside it. Yeah, works really, really well. So if I just zoom back a little bit, let's come back to 50%. So you've got the lantern illuminated. That's looking okay. If it's too bright, you can always just click on the mask and just turn it down a little bit. No issues with that. Go to the previous one. You can always just, depending on how much light you want, you can just move that to decide where you are. So we'll go with that. But of course, this lantern lights the surrounding area. So what we need to do is we need to add light to the surrounding area. So we need some light on the wall here. Now again, another mistake people make, they can take a radial gradient, they'll tend to put a radial gradient on the wall, you know, like this, and they'll put it on the wall here, and they'll bring the exposure up, and they'll say, you know, that works right. But it doesn't work, because the light down here in the distance would not be as bright as the light here. So you have to think about how that light would come onto this wall, and how it would come onto the wall is like this, right? We'd find where that lantern, if you look here, the bottom of the lamp comes up here. That means it's here is where it is. It's not down there, it's actually here. And you take a radial gradient like this, you stretch it out just a little bit, add in the color to match that we did before, not too much, just a little bit magenta there. And then you find the brightness that works for lighting that wall. So I'm bringing that back a little bit, still a bit too yellow. I'm just going to back that off a little bit. And then we've got the light on the wall there. So if I just move that down, you'll see. But this light's got a shade on the top, so it's not going to go all the way up here. So we need to subtract a brush, 100% feather this time, about 30 to 50%, something like that. And we just need to take a small brush and wash away the light that's in the top part of that radial gradient. So we're just getting the light on the wall there. And then down here we need to do the same at the bottom. So we'll take another radial gradient, and again we're going to go the way the light looks. So the bottom of this lamp column is going to be the bottom here. The light's actually going to shine out at an angle. You've got to look at that angle that light's coming out from. And then as we bring the luminance up in that area, just add that there, a bit of color, not too much, just to balance it off. You can see that we've lit that area up, just add a little bit of magenta to it. And another little trick when you are adding in light from a light fitting is add clarity. Clarity works very well to give you a nice bite. I can do the same here. I can just add a little bit of clarity to that, and just works quite well. It's a bit bright over here because this radial is lighting this wall here, and that light wouldn't light that so well. So as always, subtract a brush. We can go with the 50% flow, 100% feather, and we can just wash this bit of light away over here. So there's that light illuminated there. I would do the one in the distance, but I'm conscious of time, so I want to deal with a couple of the lights around the front here. So you've got these lights along the front of the building, and we can use the same technique. What we can do is we can take a new radial gradient here, and we can put it over this light fitting and just shape it to the same shape as the light here, and we can illuminate this light here like so. Okay, now I'm going to zoom in so you can see what we're doing. So you might think, well, this doesn't look very good over here. This is not illuminated right. So obviously we need to just remove that. So same thing, subtract the brush. Going to go with quite a small feather, about 25%, quite a high flow. And I just need to take that away from behind that fitting there. You can see I'm just washing that away from behind that fitting. And in fact, we could probably even take it a little bit away from the front, because what we're going to do is light that up. Take the brush a little bit smaller here and just go around the brush there itself, around the lamp, sorry, and just take that away from there. And then we can brighten the lamp up. So we've got that effectively illuminated there. You can see nothing around it. Just take that edge away a little bit more there. So we've lit that up, and we can bring the whites up as well if we want to make it brighter. So that's working good, but that obviously is going to light the wall here. So we're going to create a new radial gradient, and we're going to put the light to match the angle of this lamp. We're going to put it underneath here where that light would be hitting the wall, and we're just going to bring some light in underneath, you see, and in doing so it lights up the lamp itself to create the brightness of the actual lamp. So we can bring that up, add a little bit of color to it. There we go. And we've got the light coming out on the wall below that lamp. And if I drop back, you'll see the effect that has on there. You can see that it's a light over there. Now that light would light up the wall, but it'd also light up the ground below. So we would take another radial gradient, my favorite one of all. We're going to pop this underneath there, just shape it so that it's in the same sort of position there, and then we're just going to brighten that area up on the ground underneath, just a little bit of color, just to bring that in. Yeah. Now you will get a bit of light on this door, so I can add another radial gradient over the whole area here. Just bring that in there a little bit, and just ever so gently ease a bit of light into that doorway, as you can see there. So if I zoom in a little bit, you'll see more. So we're just adding that bit of light, so without and within. You see that? So that just gives you a little bit of light in that area. So again, I would work my way through these other lamps to do that. There's also a festoon here along here, so you can light those as well, which gives you a nice effect. So I can go into another radial gradient. I can take one of these lamps, a little tiny one. Let me zoom right in. And what I'm going to do, just take a little tiny lamp over that, little tiny radial gradient, and I can just brighten that up. So you can see there it's brightened up a little bit. But of course that's a blue one. You can see that's a blue one. So just bring the temp down and make a blue light there as such. There we go. And then I'm going to duplicate the mask. So I've got a brighter one on top, and I'm just going to make that one bigger. Right? Just at an angle like that. So take away so you've got this sort of this blue hue coming from this lamp. Now if you can make the lamp brighter, so we can go back into the previous one here, just make that one a little bit smaller, and we can bring up the whites on that as well, and just make that nice and bright in the center. So what you're seeing is, if I zoom back, you can see that you've got this sort of light there. Now if I did that to every one of these lamps to bring the color up, and then brought a bit of color on the ground, you'd see the effect that we would get from doing that. So if I create another radial gradient, I can always put a little radial along the ground here at the same angle, and I can always add a little bit of blue tint and just bring that light up a little bit along the footpath. And it's all about being subtle when you come in on these areas to make it look really good. So this image would take me normally about 2.5 to 3 hours to do this image completely, to get all of the lamps lit and to work the way through. And I do have a finished copy of this, which I'll show you when we're complete. Now, the other thing that I always like to do is when you have a lot of greenery, like you can see all these wonderful, you know, ivies growing on this building, is actually bring these alive a little bit. You can do that with radials, or you can do it with a brush and go into masks. I can select a new mask and select a brush, and I can put a fair bit of feather in, about 70%, come back to about sort of 40% flow, add in some exposure. But the real key here is to pick the auto mask tick box here, the little check mark for auto mask, because it works by illuminating the areas that are of the brightness that you select. So if I pick the brightness here, for example, on this plant, let me zoom in here, on this ivy, you can see this is bright already and this is dark. So if I take a brush and start with my center of my brush on the bright part and work my way down and just work over those bright areas, you will see that it will just brighten the bright areas and it won't illuminate the darker areas. So you can create a dodge and burn within the green of the plant. So the bright bits get brighter and you don't make the dark bits any brighter. So I'm effectively just sort of painting over those areas and just bringing, you see here that this is a little bit brightness here, so I can go back and forward over that a little bit and just build that brightness up. Same down through here. Over here there's some brightness there. So I'm taking the brightness that's already in these plants, you can see up here, and I'm just adding in a little bit more, just very, very subtle, just adding in a little bit more brightness to these areas, and just building it up to give it some contrast. I'll come back through there. And of course you can do the opposite as well. You can use a dark brush to, let's just do these down here as well. Look, just taking that brightness. This bush up here, that needs a bit as well, a little bit there. So you can do the opposite as well. We can take another brush. We can leave the settings as they are, quite a bit of feather, medium flow. But now I'm going to do a little minus on the exposure, and then I can go down through these darker areas and just emphasize the darker areas. And by creating light and dark into something, you create depth, you bring drama to the scene by just building on the darks and the lights. And when I pan back in a second, you're going to be quite impressed actually with what it does here. Just painting very quickly over those areas. That's it. So if I come back here, can you see now how much more depth we've brought to the image by lighting this up more? We probably need to do a little bit more through here, but it really does add quite a bit of depth to the image. But we do need to do something with the foreground if we want to draw people into this image. So one of the things I like to do is create a fake light, almost as though there's another lantern like this one over here that's slightly out of shot. And we can do that again by taking another radial gradient and bringing it in from the side of the scene like this, so that the light's off the shot, and we can bring some light in across here, and even tilt that slightly so it's almost lighting up this crossing here. And then if I bring some exposure in there like this with a little bit of color just to match it up, do you see how it's brought a foreground in? I can add some clarity to that just to make these paving stones pop down here, and it just brings in a foreground. And maybe we want to do something similar on the other side there. Again, we can create another radial gradient, and I'm just going to pop a little one over here, slightly out of shot, and just brighten that ever so slightly down there. So That was textures I was sliding there. Apologies. That's the one I want. Exposures. So I'm just going to bring that in a little bit of color, and I'm just going to add in that little bit of clarity there. And what it does is it creates a foreground. We didn't have a foreground then before, and we've now created a bit of a foreground in there. This one over here is a bit bright. I'm just going to go back into to that. Click on that, just back that off a little bit. There we go, a little bit less color as well. So it's all about being subtle, being subtle. So so we're going to come back out. So I want to sort of close this image down a little bit more. So I need to blacken the top of the sky. So I'm going to bring in another mask, create a mask, linear gradient, and I'm going to bring one in from this sort of top left corner like this. And I'm just going to darken that down and add a bit of blue, because we've got blue in the sky there. I just want to emphasize that blue a little bit more, just to bring that in there. Don't want to take those clouds out too much. And that's looking pretty good. And I'm just going to put in another radial further down the road here, as though there's some light coming from another light fitting, just to break that mid-ground up. There we go. So how are we doing for time? We're about halfway, so that's good. So I'm pretty happy with this. I need to do a little bit more to this mid-ground just to emphasize this more. What I would do is illuminate this window, this window here. So I will quickly just do that one just to give us something in the middle. So I'm going to create a new mask, new radial gradient. I'm just going to pop that radial gradient. Remember, the light is going to be out of the window. It's not going to be in the window. The light's going to be just to the side up by the ceiling. So we're just going to put that radial in there like so. We're going to boost that one up. And then we're just going to do the same as we did before. I'm just going to zoom in a bit closer. And we're just going to subtract the brush, feather it 0, flow it 100. And then we're just going to go around and just take that out. Now where you've got a curve, you can still use the shift click by effectively just following the curve with your, as you're holding down the shift key, you just keep clicking round and you can create an arch. Some of us have got a really good steady hand and we can probably paint around that arch there, but what I'm doing is effectively just shift clicking around the window. There we go. And I'm just going to come across the bottom there, just take that out, make my brush bigger, and just take the rest of this out around here. All right, there we go. So we've got the window illuminated, and then we're just going to back that flow off, bring up the feather a little bit, make our brush smaller, and we're just going to go in around this window frame and just take out the window frame in there. So just ever so gently do that. That's it. And it seems a bit tedious, and it can take you a little bit of time just to work your way through. I'm just going to darken that bit off at the top there. That's it. A little bit in the middle, but it's worth the time, because if you get it right, it can look really, really good. There we go. Just get that bit out there. And I'm just going to go to 100% flow just to do these edge lines. There we go. Right. Let's do that one across there. That's it. And we've got a little bit of light there on the wall. I'm just going to blend that ever so slightly around that edge. There we go. Right, so I can, as you can see, Still got a bit of light up there actually. Let's get rid of that. Flow 100%. Just get rid of the rest of that up there. Down here. Okay. So we can just brighten that up. Now if it's not bright enough, as you can see this window's not bright enough, we can always right click on here and duplicate the mask, and that will bring more light into that window, because we've got two effectively on top of each other. A little bit of noise being generated now because we're pushing that at least 4 or 5 stops. So just come down on that one and go to the noise slider and bring the noise slider up, and it will just blend that ever so slightly in there. And if we zoom back again, you can see that it gives us that sort of window effect there of the window illuminated. It's ever so slightly too bright, so I'm just going to back that down a little bit there. So I would work my way through all the windows here and just sort of make sure they're illuminated. So we're getting close to getting this one near finished. I would, as I say, do all the lights. I'm just going to add a little bit of detail over here in the distance on these buildings, just brighten those up slightly over there, a bit of contrast and a little bit of clarity. That's good. And I'm just going to pop a radial in the center of this building here, just to give us a little bit of detail on this roof. So again, just a little bit of exposure just coming in there, not too much, bit of contrast, and it's just sort of giving us that depth to this image. So we're pretty well finished. As I say, I would do all the other lights here as well, just to give it a little bit more detail. But just to finish off here, I'm now going to go back into the basic setting. I'm going to go back in here, and I'm now going to move the highlights and shadow sliders just to bring this alive a little bit. So I can open up the shadows more. As you can see, it does a lot to these plants, really brings them alive. I can bring down the highlights, or I can bring up the highlights just to boost this here. So you've got to find where you're quite happy. And I think a little bit more highlights boosts the sky a little bit more here. And then I'm going to do my blacks and whites. Now a lot of people do their blacks and whites early on in their process, but I tend to do it towards the end, because if you do it early on and then you affect the exposure or the highlights, it will affect your whites and blacks. So I'm going to hold down the Option or Alt key on a Windows machine, and I'm going to slide the slider on the whites here until I get a clip. Now if you look up here in the top right corner, you've got your histogram. You'll see these little triangles, and it's gone red, this triangle. And if I hover over it, you can see on the lamps down here that when I hover over it, they go red. That shows that we're clipped. We're at in this case 95%. If I go back to the whites, hold down the Option or Alt key and bring that up a little bit more, you can see you can bring more in here. I don't want to go to white on this clip. If I keep going, it will go white there. That's 100% clip. If I go to yellow, that's 95. If I go to red, that's 90. So I'm just going to come back from the red. So we're just in the black. So we're not clipping. And with the blacks, I'm going to do the same. I'm going to hold down the Option Alt key. I'm going to move this down until I see some black appear. Here we go. It's just inside those plants a little bit there. Just gives us that contrast on that shot. So I'm going to add a little bit of texture to this scene, and I'm just going to brighten the scene up a little bit, bring the exposure up. There we go. That looks pretty good. So I'm relatively happy with that. Now, it works quite well as a color image. I've got to be honest. You need to just blend the colors a little bit just to get them perfect. But I think this will make a really good black and white. And if you've watched any of my videos, you'll see that one of the things I do before I go black and white is I really get crazy with the colors. And the reason for that is that once you go black and white, you can then move the color sliders to get more or less effect. So I'm actually going to increase the saturation for this image a little bit, and I'm going to give it a whole handful of vibrance, which really makes it pop. You can see it's a bit too much. It's overpowering as a color image. And I'm going to add a little bit of contrast to this, and then I'm going to go into black and white. So if you go up here in the basics, you'll see there's black and white there. I'll click on that, and it's gone black and white. So it's still quite flat when you first go in, so we need to boost the contrast, we need to boost the clarity, And we can do that by going to the clarity slider, obviously giving it a lot more clarity there. You'd never do that in a color image. Black and white it works very well for. We've done that. We're also going to bring the contrast up, and we're going to bring the brightness up a little bit more to bring this alive. There we go. I'm bringing that up a little bit there. That's good. And I'm going to add a little bit more texture to the image as well. You have to be very careful with the texture slider. I find anything more than 10 on the texture slider is just way too much. I'm actually going to go to the black slider and bring the black slider down a little bit more, just to bring in a little bit more of the dark end to this. And I'm bring the highlights back just a little bit, because we're a bit too bright in some of the areas. That's it there. And I think we're really starting to look like something. Maybe just a shade brighter and a little bit more contrast. Now, because you're in black and white, you now get the black and white instead of the HSL sliders, where you can create, you know, the hue and the saturation, the luminance in color. In black and white, you get the color sliders, and because you came over from color, and this is really important, if you take a black and white image on your camera and try to process it, you haven't got the color sliders. You can't adapt the separate colors. The green, for example, on these bushes, if we go to green and we move the green slider now, you can see we can make the green much brighter, or we can make the green darker. We could adjust the greens, and this is really important when you're doing a black and white. If you come over from color, you've got a little bit more control. So if I boost those greens a little bit there, and then I can take the aquas back a little bit. I can take the blue a bit darker, so the sky up here goes a little bit darker. I can take the yellows and the oranges. You see that in the plants there. You can just boost those a little bit. And the orange in the sky, I can affect the orange individually. So I can look for a nice place to put the oranges, is about there. And the reds in the sky were amazing as well. So I can also find the right spot to put those in. Don't think we have much in the way of purples and magentas. I'm going to go for a bit more contrast still going up on the contrast. And those yellows and greens are a bit too bright. I'm just going to back them off a little bit. There we go. So we took an image. If I go back to where we started, that's where we started. So relatively mundane scene. The sky was very grey, didn't have a lot to play with. I did underexpose slightly, so we tidied that up. We added in the day to night effects, and as I said along the way, I would do most of the windows and most of the light fittings, and then we effectively come into something like this. Okay, and here we go. Here's Harry Potter, right? which is where we always like to end up. And as you can imagine, if we do the rest of these lights, you can get quite a good effect. And if I just actually go over into into my 500px page, we can actually find the image that I did process. Let's just go to that. Let's find the one that I did. So I just did this one obviously with you now, but here we go, with all the lights lit, with the lanterns done. In this case I only lit the bottom window, not the top window. So you've got that effect, that real, you know, darkness that draws you into the image. In fact, the one we've just done together here I quite like as well. I think that's got quite a nice effect to it as well. So yeah, so that's how I do a day to night. Sometimes I go black and white. Sometimes I tend to stay with the color. You can get that sort of black and white effect. Now, one of the things Serge likes to use is he likes to use the presets to sort of throw himself straight into a black and white with the colors. And I think it's quite a good way if you want to do a quick process. You can use a preset, and I have Serge's presets here, and find them where they are. And effectively, you can sort of choose to throw that in, and it will give you most of the radial filters and gradients to start with, and then you can move them to suit the scene. So, but for me, to be honest, what I get from the hobby is not only taking the photograph and having the camaraderie of meeting with other people and enjoying a day out, taking the photo, but I really enjoy doing the processing and turning a picture into something that's a little bit more fun and something we can work with. So, so how are we doing for time? Okay, we've got a little bit of time left. Any questions from anybody on what I've done here? Any commentary?
Check the chat.
I have a quick question regarding when you did your original sky replacement. Other than the fact that Photoshop gave you layers, could you have had the same settings in Lightroom if you did a Lightroom sky replacement?
Yeah, like it's a little bit more difficult in Lightroom because you don't have that layer effect. You'd have to try to blend the sky with what you've got. You'd have to come into Photoshop to add the sky, and then you could do blending if you wanted to in Lightroom. You can use Luminar as well, the Luminar Neo, Luminar 4, Luminar AI. There's a number of different variants of that. They're all the same, to be fair. The Luminar Neo has more one touch approaches where you can just click one button, it does it for you. But as I said earlier, I enjoy the processing as part of, I don't really want a one-click approach. And to be honest, the one-click approaches tend to give you a very sort of sanitized look as well. You can be there. But no, I tend to use Photoshop to do that, or Luminar to put the sky in. So it's a bit more difficult to do it in Lightroom. I have seen people do it and do a very good job actually. But yeah, that's the way I would do it. So here's some other examples of sort of what we've done. So that was the original image, had people in it here, as you can see, and signposts, and you can remove those and take the people out and get that sort of black and white effect. Yeah, good question though, thank you. So yeah, any other questions? Because if not, we got a little bit of time left. I can take you through. These are some of the shots I've had from Paris.
There's some questions in the chat, Jamie.
Can't see them, I'm afraid. I'm on my laptop.
Well, why don't I read them for you?
That'd be very helpful.
Ken L says, Jamie, do you always change the sky first? Seems to me that doing it on its own, get something in the way, own layer toward the end would be easier. On its own layer, doing it on its own layer at the end could be easier.
Yeah, I do it first because I want to try to get the color blend between the sky and the foreground. So for example, here's a shot we took from Paris here. Now, if you're going to put a sunset in here, you want to try to match the colors. If you do it last, your color effect will be on top of all of the other changes that you've made, right? So what you tend to do is I do it first. So in this case here, this image, it's quite a famous shot from Montmartre. You take the picture of the building on its side with the ground flat. So I immediately will go straight over to Photoshop here, and I will go into File, Edit, Sky Replacement straight away. Almost the first thing I do, we'll pick a sky. So it's just going to add the sky that we used last time now. Give it a moment to do that. Here we go. So we've put that sky in, and then I'll use the sliders as we did previously, just to make sure that we're happy with where we're going to go. So I'm just going to find where the sliders are best for this, and then maybe we'll back the color off a little bit for this one. There we go. Bit of foreground lighting, and the color adjustment. This is a really important one. That color adjustment is going to, if I bring that up, it's going to light this scene to the color of the sky, and that's the bit that I tend to want to use early on, so we get the foreground lighting the right color, and make sure that we're happy there. As I said previously, if I click new layers rather than duplicate layer and I click OK, it will add all of those separate layers in over here on the right hand side. So I can now go into any one of those separate items and deal with them separately if I want to. But to be honest, I find that Photoshop is so good at doing this and I tend not to do that. So I tend to just therefore just bring them all together as a single, bring them all together, merge layers and bring them together as a single. Get rid of the one that I don't need anymore. And then, oh, I didn't mean to do that. And then you've got the two, you effectively got the sky that's been added to it, and you can see that from the mask, that you can see the mask that it created, which is so good. So and that's how I tend to do the sky, to maintain that color as we go through. So good question. Next question, is there another one on there?
There are two more so far. One seems pretty simple. Are you using a mouse or a pen tablet?
I'm using my touchpad on my MacBook. I'm just don't have a mouse or just using my touchpad. The MacBooks do have an incredible touchpads. I mean, it's 6 by 4 inches in size. It's very sensitive. If I'm at home and I've got my laptop plugged into a larger monitor, I will tend to use a mouse then separately because I've got more of the screen to cover. But all of this evening, including all of that fine detail that you saw me doing with the day to night, is just done on my touchpad here. Yeah. So
Okay,
yeah.
great. And then the last question I have is from Holly, who has a hard time using the stamp tool, which I've had that problem. And can you explain it again?
I can indeed. Yeah, happy to do that. Here's a shot we took when we were in Paris again, Montmartre. This is Au Lapin Agile, the Agile Rabbit, and it's a little pub, a little cabaret pub. So with the stamp tool, I'm going to throw it into Photoshop quickly to show you. You do have a stamp function in Lightroom, in the new version of Lightroom, but I have to say, to be honest with you, it's not particularly very good. Oops, sorry. It's I don't know why my Photoshop has gone all awry here for a second. Let me just sort that out. Yeah, so just make that nice and big. There we go. Right, so let me just change the sky because this got a blue sky, so we'll use that same sky again. Let's not mess about. I'll just chuck the sky in there. Give it a moment. Here we go. And just adjust my edges. Let's give it a bit more color. There we go. Nice that. And adjust not too much on the foreground. Oh, there we go. Right. So I'm happy with that. Duplicate layer. Right, so stamp tool. So let's zoom in here. You see we've got this post in the middle here. The stamp tool itself, here it is, clone stamp tool. What it does is you take an image from anywhere on the scene here and you repaint it somewhere else. So for example, if I wanted to repaint this post next to it, what I could do is I could go to the top of the post here, I press the Option or Alt key on a Windows machine, and then you see it changes to a target. Instead of a circle, it's changed to a little target, and then I just click once, left click once, and what it's now done is it's now got a copy. Can you see inside now? I'll make the brush bigger. It's effectively taken a copy of that. That's what it's done. So I can move that anywhere around the screen. So if I go back to a small brush like this, it was on top of there. If I go over to the left here and then just click and hold and paint down, as I'm painting down, you'll see there's a cross moving on the right hand side, and that's what it's copying from. So as I go down, you'll see that it's made a copy of that. So I've effectively painted another one of those next to it. That's all I've done. So the clever thing about doing this is if I want to get rid of this post, if I hold down the Option key again and take a stamp to the left of this post just here, and I've taken a stamp, and I move over now on top of that post, and now I draw down it. You'll see the cross appear to the left, and as I'm drawing down, that cross is what we're copying over where we're painting. So what I'm effectively doing is now just painting down, and bosh, it's gone. But you see here the curb is not straight, perfectly straight from the copy. So what I can do is I can take another stamp from over here, click there, and now I can paint that over there, and I've straightened the edge of the curb up. You also see here that these two stones are identical because we copied it. So why don't I take a stone from over here, so option, click, and put it on this one here, click. So now I've changed that to that one over there. So we've created that random effect. So what I've now done is I've removed that post. You see on the wall here, there's a duplicate of the of that bit of wall there. So I can just take a stamp from here and put it there. But that's a copy of that. So just take a little bit of area there. And now that's random as well here. So with the space of a few clicks, we're able to get rid of that post. Now you might say, well, look at this bottom of a street lamp here that's still left. Would you tackle this? Well, this is quite a big thing to try to remove, but using the stamp tool, I would start off by the lines that I can see. So this step here, I would take a stamp from down here, I would move that over to here, and then draw a cross. You see that the cross is coming across there. So I've just taken another little stamp there just to finish that there. So I've drawn that step across the middle there. I'm then just going to go in here and take some stones from in here and just try to work my way around and just take some different stamps from different places and just sort of paint in these areas, making sure it looks, you know, reasonably random. We've got this little bit left here, so I can take a stamp from the edge of the wall here and just follow that down slightly. I can bring that down to there. Stamp from here just to bring that over, go over to this step here and just bring that step across to the wall, as you can see. And then this little bit that's left, we can take a stamp from over here and we can just paint that back in there. And guys, I think it's as magic as you might think it is when you look at it. It really impresses me what we can do. Where that post was, you'll see there's a shadow here from where that post was. We need to get rid of that shadow. So same thing, we can take a stamp from here and we can just sort of pop that in there and just paint that shadow out if we want to as well. So we got rid of the post, we got rid of the lamp post there. You know, really amazing. On the wall here, you've got this lamp post thing on the wall here. Same thing. Take a stamp from down the bottom somewhere. I'm just going to get rid of that little bit of litter that you can see there. So I'm just going to take a stamp from here, just get rid of that bit of litter, and then I'm going to take a stamp down here. I'm going to go in there and I'm just going to go up, and you can see where the cross is. It's taking the paint from the wall. Take another stamp there, look, just to paint that in. Another stamp there and just paint that out. Right, and you just take a stamp and paint, and you can get rid of almost anything, but the key is understanding you've got to follow the lines. You've got to find, and you saw when I did these lampposts here, I brought those steps across first, because that's important that you find those lines to bring things in. I don't think there's anything else we could remove from here. I mean, in the actual shot I took this out as well, this big bollard here. I also took that out of the shot just to let's just zoom out here. So we got rid of that, you see. So if I just
Jamie, can I ask you a follow-up question?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, absolutely.
The same way you did a paint or copy of the stones, etc., is there a feature in Photoshop that would allow you to just copy the luminance and to get rid of the shadow?
Yes. Yes, you can do that. There is a luminance mask you can create to do that. I don't tend to use it because I find that the stamp tool allows us to move very quickly to remove things. So here's the actual finished shot that I did of that particular scene. I actually left those things in, but took the big bollard out down here. And I also took the cars out that were on the far right hand side and just used this part over here. You see this part of the road here. I used that to copy over into here. That's actually the same. That's the same thing, to get rid of all the cars. But you can use the luminance filter. You can't mask. You can do that. I don't tend to use that process. The funny thing about Photoshop is there's like 10,000 different ways to skin the cat, right? and I think it's one of the biggest problems with certainly Photoshop as opposed to Lightroom, but certainly Photoshop is that we can all be what's the right word? It can be overwhelming sometimes when you come into Photoshop and Lightroom, that there are so many functions and so many features that you can be intimidated. Let's be honest, we can be intimidated by it. I'm self-taught. I've watched videos online. I've followed Serge for over a decade and watched him and his techniques as he developed over the years. And to be honest, you've got to develop your own style. You use the tools that you learn in Photoshop and Lightroom to work for you. I'm no Photoshop master, no way. There are so many things. There's so many good channels on YouTube where people do some amazing things with Lightroom. With Photoshop. So I'd say I'm pretty proficient at Lightroom, but Photoshop I probably 20% of the features I use really. But yeah, I mean, hopefully that gives you a good idea. Is there any last questions there?
Jamie, there's a few things that I do when I do those types of patches. There's a capability of changing the angle as well. It's a little bit complicated to do, so it's only recently that I've tried doing that. But you can change the angle of what's copied. You could also use the darken and lighten blend modes.
Yep.
To add some randomness. What I try to do is put more randomness back into it so you don't get any repeating patterns. But this way you have the underlying pieces, but you can throw some randomness on top of it.
Yep, that's good advice. Yeah, that's good advice. If you need to develop some randomness, that is a very good way of doing it. Yeah. I also think sometimes what I've used here is an autumn glow. Effectively, I've taken that final image and I've taken another layer and blurred that layer and added a lot of contrast to that layer and then blended it back in like 10% to get this sort of luminance that you get from doing that. That's quite a good trick as well. I know in Luminar they have the glow and the mystical function available that you can use yourself. You can just use sliders for those things. So sometimes adding a bit of glow as well as adding that randomness in can really make a difference. And also taking a texture and applying a texture in your blend and just subtly bringing that into the background, maybe a metal surface or a picture of bark or something like that, just blended ever so gently into the back of an image can bring that randomness as well and create quite a nice effect. But I think really at the end of the day, guys, thank you very much for taking the time to watch and watch me have a play and have a good time. The key here really is you got to have fun, right? You got to have fun. That's what we do this for. And I think if you just take time to have fun, try to learn a little bit more, try to use some different techniques. Remember, you can't break anything. You can always go back in the history and undo whatever you've done. Experiment and play with it. And more important than all, you've got to try to develop your own style. And that style you've got to then develop over time and work with it. So you get your pictures tend to look or have a feel to them that's your way of working, and that's something that Serge definitely taught me over the years was develop your style and make it your own, really, at the end of the day. So, but anyway, thank you very much for taking the time. Yeah.
Thank you, Jamie.
I don't know if you have to go right now.
I don't have to go right now. I'm happy to give a little bit more
'cause
time if you're happy to stay around.
Holly has Holly has one more question because she does beautiful lighthouses we've seen with Serge, and she wanted to know how to light a lighthouse. I guess you mean the light in the lighthouse, Holly? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't actually have any pictures of now you've set me a challenge now. I'm going to go and shoot one of the lighthouses near where I live. I'm going to do that. And maybe try to do a day to night, right? On a lighthouse. That's what you're asking, yeah? So let's try to do that. Let me try to get a picture of one of the local lighthouses, and we'll try to do a day to night. Can't even think right now how I could do that. But then if you think about how the light comes from a lighthouse, then maybe we can recreate that. So but the important thing to remember, and I was talking to Kimberly, one of the members of Serge's club a while back, about light. When you're out walking around, particularly in the twilight zone in that evening, right, and there is artificial light on, whether it be on a property or on a building or whatever it might be, take time to just stop and have a look at the way that the light is coming from the light fitting or from the windows or the reflections that they're getting. Just take a moment to actually just stand and look at it. And what we do in Lightroom, if you think about it, we don't actually create new objects. All we really do is change the luminance, the brightness or the darkness, or the color. We just make it brighter or darker or more colorful or whatever. We don't actually physically put images into the image, we just play with light and color. That's all we're really doing. We're just artists. So take time to look at light. That I would urge everybody to do that. I think all photographers are the same, that when we first get into photography, the first thing we notice about the world around us once we start taking photographs is how much color there is. I think everybody relates on that. You look at the sky and it's not just blue. There's 20 shades of blue. There's grays. There's so many different colors. And you look at grass and plants and the greens and the colors. And same should be for light. Take time to look at the light. Look at the way light reflects and the light works. And then remember that and use that in your techniques. So you've set me a challenge now for lighthouse. I'm going to go and shoot a lighthouse, and I'll do that in one of my videos.
And be sure. Let me bring my camera up so you can see me talking. But be sure to check out Jamie. I put your YouTube link in the chat, and follow Jamie. He has a YouTube channel, and he does a great job. I follow it.
Thank you.
He does a great job. So everybody follow Jamie, help him out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm amazed.
I'm just going to thank you for everybody.
No, I appreciate that. And I'm amazed, actually, one of the nicest things about doing it, I've only been doing it for a little while. Serge told me I had to do it. He demanded that I had to do it. And he said, you got to do it because you got to share your ideas with people. Serge is a great friend of mine. And I started off just as a member of the Academy. And I started off just working with him. And he's been such an inspiration to me over the years. And if you can afford it, take the time to go on one of his workshops. It'll blow your mind. It really will. Change the way you think about photography forever. And he took me from being a mediocre photographer to a reasonably good photographer, and I appreciate that with him. And so yeah, I'd be grateful if you follow. But the lovely thing about the YouTube, more than anything else, on the Facebook page, is the lovely comments that people leave and the questions that they ask. And I really enjoy interacting with people. There's a few nutcases out there in the world. Lucky there's a right-click block function in both of them. But on the whole, most people are just really lovely to talk to. And I'm always interested in your ideas as well, like this evening, talking about some of the different ways you do things as well, because every day is a school day, always. So anyway.
In the past, I've used Serge's name as a verb. My friend said once I started doing Serge's techniques that he started to respect my photography. So he'd say, "Why don't you take that picture and Serge it?" I think your name is about to become a verb. So I think I'm gonna Jamie a number of my pictures.
Well, thank you.
I already did that in my head.
You always do that.
Richard O'Keefe already does that.
Yeah, I did that in my head already.
Yeah.
Well, look, take a time to have a look at my YouTube channel. I've done quite a lot of videos now, something like 35 videos, I think, something crazy.
Yeah.
And there, I'm trying different things, doing different things. I need to probably do a little bit more day to night for everybody. I think everybody really appreciates the day to night way of doing things. So I'm going to try and do a little bit more day to night rather than just the post processing, just to show.
And I think that's a good idea because, YouTube's all about, kind of trying to get to something very narrow. And then once you solidify that, we want to get you, he's at 823, by the way, he's at 823 subscribers. Get you to 1,000, you start making some money.
Oh, I'm not worried about the money right now. I'm enjoying
No, I
myself,
know,
but
the stuff you do.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Maybe one
make
day,
a little bit more.
maybe one day it'll put a few pennies in the pocket. But I enjoy the hobby so much. I mean, I'm an electrical engineer. I'm a consultant electrical engineer. I work in the transmission industry. I make a fortune correcting everybody else's problems. So I'm quite happy doing that. But the photography might be my future when I come to retire, maybe. And the more support we have, it's very much appreciated. So anyway, guys, keep in touch. More than happy to chat with you. Take the time to chat with me on YouTube or my Facebook page. Happy to do that. Have a look at my 500px page where most of my pictures are. And let's keep in touch. I'll be coming back again. Serge has invited me back in June to do another webinar, and I think also in July. I think we're going to be graced by George and Ricardo as well for a couple of trips over the spring. They're going to come on, great photographers, really great guys as well. So thank you very much, and I'll say bye-bye for now.
Amazing. Thank you.
See you all
Thank you,
soon.
Jamie.
Cheerio then. Bye-bye.
Bye, Jamie.
Thank you, Jamie.
Bye.